Good evening. This is Quintus Curtius. Welcome back to the podcast. And in this podcast, I'm going to be answering an email question that I received from a reader the day before yesterday. And it's an interesting question. It seems to fall into the category of the sort of the standard young guy question, young guy looking for answers type question, which are good, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Let me first read some selections here from his email. He says, Hi Quintus, I'm a reader of your blog and have recently purchased your books, Pathways and Sallust. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I was wondering if you could give me some advice. I'm 24 years old and come from a wealthy family. Currently, I am building a business that can allow me the freedom to pursue a life of travel and hedonism. I have tasted that life on and off again since I was 19 while traveling solo to Poland, Britain, Montenegro, a couple other places. I see around myself and my family a lot of material comfort, and I know I don't want it. I am blessed to have a platform, in other words, family capital and political connections that can allow me to build something of my own. However, I keep having some reoccurring thoughts over and over again, like, if I ever settle down, will it be in my early 30s or 40s? If I get married, should I do it within my own culture, or will it be a foreign wife? I will spend my 30s traveling and dating girls from different countries without even knowing if my business will work. My question is, if I do end up pursuing a life of travel, actually end up achieving my dreams of freedom, would that be a disservice to my future kids? I pursue my personal goals, and the trade-off would be in terms of wealth that I could have built for the future generation, as I probably won't grow my business after some point, blah, 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 blah. Lastly, I know it's all hypothetical, but I can't seem to stop my thoughts from going in that direction. What do you think? Kind regards, H. All right. So, this email falls into the category of, I would call, the standard young guy conundrums, young man's conundrums. And bless their souls. You get a lot of young guys that will be filled with conflicted thoughts, questions, self-doubts, emotional turbulence, self-examination, all these sorts of intense emotions, because that's what young guys are like. Young guys in their 20s. This guy's 24, okay? And you have to understand, when you're reading an email like this, you have to put it in context. You have to first look at the source, okay? Just some general advice here, not just for him, but for other people who will get solicited questions from younger guys. You have to kind of put yourself in younger man's mindset, young guy mindset, okay? Young guys are aggressive, they're idealistic, they're energetic, they're full of passion, they're full of intensity. They want to throw themselves out there in the world. They want to find a liege lord to serve in many ways. They want a mission. They want action, they want things done, they want to get things done. And God bless them for it, because we need young men. That's what young men are for. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what they're supposed to do. Now, on top of all that, this guy comes from a culture, and I didn't, just out of respect for him, I didn't want to just reveal too much out of that. But he comes from a culture that's what I would call very structured, a culture that's very structured, where there are real intense, specific expectations for sons. And they're told from a very early age that they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to get married, they have to get a profession, they've got to do this. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but you also have to understand this guy is also coming from a family environment where he has a lot of pressure on him. He has a lot of pressure from mother, father, aunts, uncles, okay, from a lot of people. So you have to appreciate that when you get a question like this is a guy who's feeling, he's what I would call sort of chafing at the bit. When you have a horse and you're just training him to take direction, to put a bridle in him and to have him take direction. He's he's kind of chomping at the bit. He's ready to take off, but he doesn't really want to offend his family. He doesn't really want to offend his background. He doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't really know what to do. And that's okay. That's kind of the reason why he's asking these questions. All right, so my answer to you, Mr. H, is first of all, realize that you're a younger guy, all right? You're young. You've got plenty of time at that age to make mistakes, to recover, to build yourself a life, as long as you don't do something completely and insanely stupid, which you don't sound like you're that type. All right, so, but, looking back on my 20s, and I'm 50 right now, so I do have some perspective. For what it's worth. You can take it for what it's worth. Looking back as a man of 50 to a guy in his early 20s, I would say this: don't get too stressed out about things, man. Don't worry about it so much. You know how I know that? Because I used to be like you. I used to be the type of guy at your age. I was always worried about everything. What am I going to do? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with that? I don't know what's going on, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? If I could take my youthful self aside and give some counsel to myself, I would say, you know what? Relax. Focus on what you have to do right now. A man in his early 20s, in my opinion, should be doing a couple things. He should be focused on learning a trade. Number one, he should be learning a trade. He should be completing his education and setting himself up for a life of some stability. Okay. Now, I'm all about collecting experience. I'm all about traveling. I'm all about doing all those things. And you can work that into your education and your training. That's fine. But primarily, you've got to think about the long term, because if you delay things like that and you postpone things like that, you're going to find yourself behind the power curve. You're going to find yourself slipping behind other people. So the first thing you should be worried about right now is not about what your future kids are going to think or a life of hedonism and all this other gobbledygook. Okay, that's all bullshit. Forget all that bullshit. The number one thing you need to be doing right now is, focus on what you need to do to get to lay the groundwork for some sort of financial stability. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you need to have a heart attack and you have to be a lunatic and you have to, go into a conniption if you do badly on some test or something or any of that other bullshit. But what I am saying is that you need to be industrious. Young men need to be industrious. You need to be focusing on the job at hand. Be industrious, but without being neurotic, okay? Because there are some cultures, which I will not name, that sort of inculcate these obsessional desires to, quote, succeed, where you've got to learn this, you got to have that, you got to do 15 different things. And the poor kid is a neurotic basket case. And he loses the ability to social. He doesn't have any real background in bonding with other men or with women, or he has basically no social skills, and he's just a programmed automaton. And I don't agree with that either. And that's a big problem. So don't slip into that trap either. All right. So again, to reiterate, the first hierarchy of need should be the acquisition of a profession or trade. And realize it makes no difference to me what sort of trade a man does. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you want to be a brain surgeon or a plumber or a carpenter or whatever you want to do, but do something. Do something that you can sustain yourself in it. And the second responsibility in the hierarchy is, I think, the acquisition of experiences. Young men need to get out there and they need to be collecting experiences, because a well-educated, well-adjusted, a well-rounded man needs to have worldly experiences. Now, notice I did not say stupid-ass, foolish, frivolous experiences. I said worldly experiences. Now that carries with it the understood prerequisite that you will exercise restraint, responsibility, and moderation. Okay, do you hear me? Restraint, responsibility, and moderation. Remember those words. That's what you need to be focusing on. Okay, you can't go out there and act like a fool and do stupid things and harm yourself or harm other people. But you should be collecting experiences. You should be traveling when you can. You should be pursuing a social life and interactions with the opposite gender in a responsible way. You should be joining groups. You should be interacting with young men your own age and different ages, whatever. Okay, you need to get real world experience. Real world experience. Okay, so that's the second thing. And the third thing is I think you need to continue with your program of reading, study, education, because travel can't do everything. Travel is a good adjunct to things, but you also need to be reading. You need to be acquiring abstract and practical knowledge through books as well. All right? When you combine books, travel, reading, real-world experiences, you've got a really unstoppable combination. So these are the things that you should be focusing on, all right? Because I think this is the type of counsel that this guy, Mr. H, needs here, because his email is all over the place. He's got basically 5 or 6 different questions buried into one email. And what that tells me is this guy is just he's all over the place. He doesn't really know what to do. He's not really sure what he should be doing. He's got a lot of conflicted thoughts. But my response to this guy is focus on the specifics. You need to keep in mind the hierarchy of importance of things you need to do. Forget about all this if I ever settle down and kids and all. You don't know what life is going to throw at you, dude. You don't know. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about who you're going to marry or what kids you're going to have or you're going to do disservice to your family. Don't worry about that. I know your parents are probably filling you with all these obsessional neuroses and things about that. And that's a real problem with some of these cultures where everything is overly structured. It's a real problem because what happens is it imparts neurotic behavior and obsessional behavior in young men, which I think really do them a disservice in the long run. So you have to try, and look, I'm not saying, look, you love your parents, respect your parents, but understand their limitations. They don't have all the answers. And if you want to grow and develop as a man, you need to understand that. And you need to be seeking out and interacting with people of different backgrounds. Because only in that way are you really going to develop yourself and find these experiences that you really need to find. So travel abroad is very good for that. You can get away from your cultural environment, get away from your family, and you can get a chance to see what the world really has to offer. So don't worry about, you're 24 years old. You shouldn't even be thinking about, am I going to have kids or my wife, what am I going to do and all this other stuff. Forget about all that, okay? As I said, right now, focus on earning or learning some skill or trade which will give you financial stability. Number 2, acquiring experiences. And number 3, continuing your educational program through reading, intensive study, and travel. So if you can do that, if you can do those things, then these other questions that you have will either fade into insignificance or they will become self-answering questions. And you will have answered your own question, sir. All right. So that will conclude this podcast for today. And until next time, I'm Quintus Curtius. Good night.